It began early, just after sunrise on March 16, 1968. The company of young American soldiers boarded helicopters and lifted off towards a cluster of small farming hamlets in South Vietnam. Their target that morning was a place marked on the maps as My Lai 4. Intelligence reports had warned that the area was crawling with Viet Cong guerrillas. The men expected a battle, one they had been waiting for. For months, these soldiers of Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry, had walked through jungles and rice paddies without seeing the enemy. But they had seen their friends maimed and killed by mines and booby traps. The tension had been building. They were told that My Lai was a stronghold of the Viet Cong, 48th Battalion, the same force that had attacked during the Tet Offensive weeks earlier. When the helicopters came in low over the fields that morning, there was no enemy fire, no ambush, no sign of resistance. What they saw instead were villagers, farmers, women, children, and old men beginning their day. Smoke rose from the cooking fires, chickens scattered as skids touched the ground. The soldiers spread out, tense and alert. They had been told that civilians would be gone by that hour, and that anyone still present could be considered the enemy. Then, for reasons that will never be fully understood, the shooting began. Men fired into huts, into trees, and into fields. Grenades exploded in irrigation ditches. Villagers were rounded up, ordered to stand in groups, and cut down with bursts of rifle fire. In one small patch of ground near a drainage ditch, a crowd of terrified people was gathered, mostly women clutching their children, old men, and some teenagers. When the firing stopped, the ditch was full of bodies. Survivors would later recall the sound of crying, the smell of smoke, and the disbelief that their neighbors, the same Americans who had handed out candy weeks before, were now killing without mercy. Elsewhere, soldiers burned homes, destroyed food stores, and shot livestock. It was not a battle. It was an eruption of anger and confusion. By mid-morning, the hamlet was nearly silent except for the crackle of flames and the whine of insects. Overhead, a light observation helicopter circled. Its pilot was Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson, Jr. He could see what was happening below. He and his 2 crewmen saw bodies scattered across the fields and wounded civilians still moving among the dead. At first, Thompson thought it must be a mistake. Perhaps artillery had gone astray. But then he saw soldiers shooting at unarmed villagers. He landed his helicopter near a ditch and asked if he could help evacuate the wounded. The reply came back cold. There was nothing to evacuate. By noon, hundreds of villagers were dead, men, women, and children. The official count would vary, but 347 to more than 500 were reported. Charlie Company reported 1 self-inflicted wound and no enemy fire. Only a few weapons were found, yet their mission report claimed more than 100 Viet Cong were killed. The operation was hailed as a success. That night, the soldiers ate, cleaned their rifles, then wrote letters home. Many said nothing. A few broke down. Most simply tried to forget it. In the days that followed, the official story spread through the command structure. Reports described a fierce battle with heavy enemy casualties. General Westmoreland, the commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam, even sent a congratulatory message to the unit. But the truth was harder to bury than anyone expected. A few soldiers, disturbed by what they had seen, began to talk. But a year later, an independent journalist named Seymour Hersh got hold of the story. He tracked down Lieutenant William Calley, who had led the platoon at the center of the killings. Hersh's article appeared in dozens of newspapers in November of 1969. More than a year and a half after the massacre, then came the photographs. An Army photographer had been in My Lai that day, using both an official Army camera and his personal one loaded with color film. The images he had taken, bodies piled in ditches, women and children lying where they had fallen, were published in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. The pictures left no room for doubt. America could no longer look away. The news hit like a shockwave. The country was already divided over the war, and now it had a face for its doubts.
Survivors have claimed that an American infantry patrol sweeping through their village in March last year executed more than 500 unarmed men, women, and children.
It still isn't known exactly what happened in the Vietnamese village of My Lai, scene of multiple killings of civilians about 18 months ago. There are numerous charges.
A massacre committed by its own soldiers. The name My Lai became a synonym for everything that had gone wrong in Vietnam. Under public pressure, the army launched a full investigation. In all, 26 men were charged. Only one was convicted, Lieutenant Calley. He was found guilty of murdering 22 villagers. His sentence was life in prison, but political pressure and public sympathy reduced it to house arrest. He served just over 3 years. No senior officers faced prison. Many were quietly reassigned or retired. Decades later, when asked to speak publicly, Lieutenant Calley finally said he felt remorse. He apologized to the Vietnamese people, to his fellow soldiers, and to families of those who died. But for many, the apology came too late. The My Lai Massacre remains one of the most studied and haunting episodes in American military history. Not just for the horror of what happened, but for the questions it forced the world to ask. How could ordinary young men, barely out of high school, become instruments of such violence? How could officers look the other way? And how could a nation that saw itself as a force for freedom commit such an act in the name of victory? There are no simple answers. War distorts judgment. It erases boundaries. It replaces fear and hatred with obedience and survival. And once those lines were crossed, they are not easily redrawn. The war in Vietnam ended years ago, but My Lai endures as a place, a lesson, and a warning. In the heat and confusion of war, the hardest battle is often the one fought within ourselves. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe and like this video.